John Self, and welcome to Lunch and Learn. This is an encore presentation on our Lunch and Learn from Tuesday, elevating your interviewing skills in a very intense job market with excessive competition. We're glad you're with us today. We hope that if you have any questions, that you'll get in touch with us at johngself.com. We run an online, on-demand career coaching practice as well as customized high-end one-on-one coaching programs under the brand Guiding Your Career. And that's what we are. We're not career consultants necessarily. We're career guides who are committed to helping you achieve your goals, whether it is, for that next better job or whether it's just to advance your career or to set up a plan so you know where you're going. Today, our agenda starts with white-collar recession. That's an interesting term. It's not one that a lot of people are familiar with unless you've been reading my newsletter. And the question is, white-collar recession, what is it? Is it economic or is it structural realignment? The next point, the outlook for future employment. That's really, really important as you prepare for a job search or prepare to advance your career. Third is the paradigm shift for the job search. I mean, this is really, that's a word that got overused in the 80s and 90s, but we really are seeing a major structural shift in how the job market works. The importance of a career network is part of that shift. It's always been necessary, but now it's critical. You also have to understand your value. The people who are doing well in this hyper-competitive environment are the people who understand their value and know how to communicate it. And you have to elevate your interviewing skills. Careers have always been made or broken at the interview table. And in this era that we're going through with this incredible competition, your ability to communicate your value, your ability to tell your story is absolutely essential. And finally, today, we're going to talk about the importance of storytelling. So what's the outlook for the future look like? Well, the job extension trend began to emerge in 2012 with this concept called job extension. What does that mean? Well, to give you a simple example, and from the healthcare industry, which I spent a lot of my time earlier in my career, you have one hospital, and it's a big hospital, maybe 200 or 300 beds. And then you have surrounded in an area of the region with some smaller community hospitals, maybe an ambulatory care clinic or a critical access hospital, which are smaller facilities, maybe less than 25 beds. And then you have maybe a couple of 100-bed community hospitals. Well, what job extension is, they'll take the CEO from the larger hospital and name him market CEO. The CEOs from those smaller organizations and institutions will be removed from their jobs, or they can take a cut and pay and a lesser scope of responsibility. And nobody who was interested in advancing their career wants to be sidelined that way. So most of the people leave and they're replaced with lower level people called administrative directors or administrative officers for the hospital. They report to that regional market CEO. And so that's the definition of a job extension. It is not just in healthcare, it's in publishing, it's in retail, it's across the board where people are extending jobs. Sometimes they're laying off 3 executives and putting more responsibility for the operations on one executive. And this is not something that's just going to be here today and gone tomorrow. The pandemic triggered extensive executive and management layoffs with the remote working model. So with people working at home, people decided, hey, we don't need all of this overhead. And so they furloughed executives and managers. And as the pandemic eased, though, companies took a hard look at layers of overhead. How many layers did it take to get to the top? And these inefficiencies resulted in the thousands of executive job losses in the U.S. What am I saying? I'm saying when we started back to work from the pandemic, companies started looking, do we need all of these people? The answer was no. So the furloughs became layoffs. And the companies were able to position themselves and save thousands of dollars in overhead. But the bad sign, or the bad news, was that a lot of really capable, good people who had been loyal to the company lost their jobs. So is this structural or is it economic? I think it's structural. A lot of these companies, the economy in the U.S., the inflation on food notwithstanding, The economy in the U.S. has been very healthy by the numbers. We've had 42 months of uninterrupted job growth. So although people are not happy about where we're going economically because of the inflation primarily on food costs, this is not an economic crisis. What we're seeing on these layoffs and this white collar recession is structural. Companies are reevaluating how they organize themselves and how they discharge their business model responsibilities. So what does this really mean? Well, a white collar recession means that there are more people in the executive and management levels than there are available jobs. And they call it the white collar recession. So this paradigm shift that we're seeing in recruiting is upending the job market and the talent acquisition process. And this is only making job search much more complicated. I'm going to can't move my video monitor down. I'm sorry, it blocks part of the headline, but it says the job search rules. You can't rely on best practices from 10 years ago or 5 years ago. Things have changed. We're now moving to a computerized, automated environment where companies are getting rid of some of the human factors in talent acquisition, and they are bringing in machines that can speed up the process and hopefully take out bias and discrimination from the recruiting process. And automated AI is now used by 98% of the companies. That doesn't mean that all the companies in America that have this capability have their own system. No, some people contract with iHire, Indeed, ZipRecruiter. It's all basically the same concept. But here's the reality. For every 10 resumes that are submitted online, only about 2 or 3 are seen by a human. And that's pretty staggering. When you do apply online, if you're solely dependent on online applications to find your next job, you have to understand that your odds are going to be around 150 to 1. You're always going to have, that many applicants for the job. The average customization time for your resume, because they're using computers to make the initial decisions about who's going to move forward and ultimately be hired, that's made by a computer now. It's made by an algorithmic formula. And in order to be picked for that, you can have great experience, but if you don't use the right keywords, if you're not using the right key phrases, you're not going to get picked. This whole process of applicant tracking systems, ATS, is the very definition of an inexact science. It has great promise. Will it reduce cost? Yes, it already has. Will it improve efficiency? Well, it certainly still has the promise. You can certainly see where there's areas where it has improved efficiencies. Does it have the ability to rule out bias and discrimination? Absolutely. And that's very, very laudable goal. But in order for that resume to read and understand who you are and whether you qualify for that job, you have to spend between an hour and a half customizing it. Now, you're not tearing it up and starting all over, but you are rewriting whole segments so that you can use key phrases and keywords from industry, from the industry, but also from the job summary that they post. Now, one of the absolute must as you go forward is you've got to build a network. And a lot of people, we've been talking about that since the 70s. And I talked about it frequently in the 80s when I was doing presentations to professional organizations. And for the last 10 years, through 2022, I spoke at a global professional association, and my job was to talk about networking and job interviewing and the process. I can tell you now that 60% of the best jobs, the ones that everybody would like to have, are never posted. Okay? So I don't care how good you are with a computer, they're not visible on any public websites. And how they're filled, those jobs are filled, is by referral. In other words, referrals are key. How do you have referrals? You have a network, people who know people, who hear things and who know you and say, you really need to talk to this guy, Jack. He really has done an incredible job. I've seen his resume. I'm impressed. I think you will be too. Okay. So you have to have a network. Well, a lot of people are just indiscriminate about who they put into their network. They don't have any really standards. They don't have any strategy aligned to it. They don't know where they're going with their careers and their lives. So they don't know where to focus their attention. let me tell you something. If connections will not find you a job. So you can have 16,000 connections on LinkedIn and still be struggling to find a job. You have to have a network that's small enough so that you can build connection relationships. It has to be big enough to really help you propel your career. Robin Dunbar, a British anthropologist, said that the ideal size for a network is between 125 and 150 people. His research showed that that's the optimal number that you can actually have in a network and still develop relationships. Now, everybody likes to talk about LinkedIn, and LinkedIn is an incredible tool. It's very powerful. In the US, there are 200 million users on LinkedIn, but it's just a tool. It's not going to find you a job. Now, a recruiting firm may use it to help identify you so you could say, yes, it did find me a job. A lot of in-house recruiters are using LinkedIn's tools now to find candidates. They have scanners that you can take an algorithm for a certain job, a VP of operations, a VP of finance, a VP of clinical operations. Load the algorithm in with what you're looking for, and they can scan thousands of LinkedIn profiles in no time at all and come up with 50, 100, 200 possible candidates. Those are big numbers, and they're awfully disappointing and discouraging if you're trying to build your career back. If you've lost your job in a consolidation or through a layoff, those kind of numbers are extremely discouraging. But you have to understand that you have every opportunity to be discovered just like anybody else does. So keep in mind, LinkedIn is a tool. It is the networking, though, remains a contact sport. So you may identify people in your vertical where you want to build a network to move up to a certain position in that vertical. And LinkedIn can help you identify those people and give you enormous background. You can get a connection with that person, but that's not going to be enough. You have to build a relationship. LinkedIn networking is not just oh God, I lost my job, I need to start networking. No, you do. But the networking that you really want to invest in is the long-term networking where you build meaningfully deep relationships and they will refer you to jobs that they hear about. That's what is important. So think of it like you buy a home and you improve it and you make it look nicer because you hope when you sell it, you have equity. Well, your LinkedIn network, your career networks, excuse me, that you may have used LinkedIn to help you get started to build, that will bring you equity in your career. Now, network contacts, because they may know people in the organization, can take you through the side door. That means you're not reliant on that computer or those computer bots to decide if you're qualified for the job because the networking contact can email or drop off a copy of your resume. So that's called the side door strategy. Now, the referral odds when you are just applying online are about 150 or more to 1. That's the average. That's the average. Okay. It's not uncommon on certain really, nice executive jobs that are posted to get 150, 200 people within an hour of the posting going up. Okay. The referral odds improve with a recruiter. If you are contacted by a recruiter for a position, your odds drop from 150 to 200 to 1 down to about 31 to 1. But if you have a network contact, somebody who can refer you into the organization as a trusted contact, somebody who can recommend you, your improvement goes to 16 to 1. So not only are you able, using the career network, to bypass the bots, the fickle bots, but you're also able to improve your odds. What is the case against networking? Why are you not doing it? You are going to have to do it in the future because this technology is only going to become more challenging, more demanding. And if you don't do it, you're going to find yourself on the sidelines. Now, thanks to NBC for sharing this picture with us, because this is the ultimate photo for frustration and exasperation. One of the things that you have to understand about today's job market is that there's a cruel reality to job search. Rejection is common. It can take 100 submissions to land an interview. 100 submissions. That's not an exception. That's not the outlier. You hear those stories all the time. And a lot of times those rejections come because they didn't invest the time to customize their resume. If your resume is just generic, you're going to get kicked out and you'll never know because a lot of those applicant tracking systems, ATS, do not have applicant messaging modules or they're not turned on. And so you cannot be picked and will never know it. Okay. That's why some employees refer to ATS as applicant tossing systems. It can take 100 submissions to land an interview. Remember earlier I said that it takes an hour to an hour and a half to customize your resume to the extent that you have a fighting chance to get through the applicant screening process. So you understanding your value is in addition to having a career network, in addition to having a customized resume, you really need to understand your value. It's critical in today's job market. When somebody says, John, tell us about yourself, they're not asking me to summarize my resume. And I've made that mistake dozens of times earlier in my career before I got into this whole business of recruiting and coaching. I mean, I did that so many times, it was embarrassing. So now I've learned the hard way that what they're really asking is, why should we hire you? You don't need to recite your resume to advance the argument. You need to tell them what you believe in. You need to tell them why you're interested in the job. You need to talk about the successes you've had, and you need to do it in a very succinct manner. So that's one of the things, that understanding your value and then having a compelling narrative to deliver that to the interviewer is really, really important. So we call it creating your value brand statement, a VBS. And what does that do? Well, here's how you go about doing it. And this is not rocket science. It's not complicated, but it's not, I mean, it takes some real digging and some real self-reflection. So it's not easy, but it's not complicated. On the left side of a page, list all of your strengths. You may have 10, you may have 5, you may have 30. Now, if you have more than 60 or 70, we might want to get you counseling for narcissism. But most people have between 10 and 20. And so you want to write those down. And they may seem like, oh, God, this is so silly. I don't want to put that down. I'd be embarrassed if anybody sees that. Put it down if you think it's a strength. Okay. This is where you start digging deep. You got to push yourself to go through this process. Then on the other side of the page, after you list all those strengths, whether they're 10 or 20, you start saying, okay, number one, I am a consensus builder. What's the proof? Can't give me an example. Why are you a consensus builder? Why do you say that? And you start putting down the proof for each one of these strengths. And what you're going to find is some you have a really good case to say this is a strength. And others you're going to say, wow, these number 4, 6, and 10 are kind of similar. I think I'll come up with a way to put those together. Why are you thinking about consolidating? Because you can only have 4, maybe 5 strengths that you're really going to focus on, because that's really important. You can't go in and start talking about anything and everything because you'll overwhelm the employer. You don't want to overwhelm them. You want to get them focused on who you are and what your value is. So this is not a one and done process. Once you come down and you list all your strengths and you list the evidence, you may eliminate some. You've got to get it down to 4 or 5, and my preference is 4. And those are going to be signature strengths, and start consolidating and think about, okay, I probably have I can go into my files and maybe develop some better metrics to support this. Great. If you have it, do it. If you don't, let me share this tidbit with you. If you're not keeping a journal, you are screwing up. You are really making a bad mistake. Why? Because you're not ever going to remember all your successes. You're going to forget stuff that just later in life you'll remember it, go, oh my God, why didn't I use that? Write it down. Keep a journal. I'm going to do a presentation on journaling probably a week from this presentation, and how to keep a journal. And we'll have some really realistic examples of how to do it and what kind of information to collect. But 10 years from a job or 5 years from a job, if you can go look at your journal and say, I did this project. One of my big entries was Lifelight. I was the original director of Lifelight at Herman Hospital, and then set up the next 14 programs nationally. And I kept a journal, so I remember a lot of the things I did and the people I worked with. Would I have remembered that otherwise? Probably not all of it. So it's good to have that journal because that becomes a roadmap for your future. It becomes a research document where you can absolutely strengthen your stories that you tell, strengthen your examples because you have written down specific metrics. So it can be an extremely powerful tool to help you build your case for being hired. Now, your VBS, your value brand statement, when you draft this, once you finish with your final run through and say, okay, I've got 4 or 5 signature strengths here. Now, I'm going to draft something that summarizes these strengths, and I'm going to draft it in a narrative format. I'm happy to share some with you. If you'd like to see one, you can email me at john@johngself.com and just make reference to this lunch and learn and say I'd like a copy or an example of a value brand statement. And I'll be happy to do that. It can only be 200 or 300 words. Now think of this, politicians, they go around the country, and in Iowa, they may not talk about taxing or putting taxes on corn. In some other places, they may not be so corn friendly, and in some places they may be corn friendly. It just depends on what the constituents do. Everybody knows that politicians are going to say what they need to say in order to get elected. I mean, that's their financial security. So you think of this: they have a stump speech that they mix and match. Some places they may talk a lot about these issues, and someplace else those issues aren't going to be very well received, so they just drop them out of the speech. You're going to do the same thing with your value brand statement. But you're going to learn it, and you not memorize it, learn it from your heart, and then know how to substitute or take pieces of it out and use it in answers. People who've really worked at this say that it absolutely makes a meaningful difference. I can tell you that candidates I've interviewed who have a value brand statement, they are measures head and foot or head and whatever, excuse me, but head and tail above the people who don't have a value brand statement. Their resume is more focused. They're more focused with their interview questions. Now, again, VBS is akin to a political stump speech. Use appropriate parts. Remember, this is not about you. It's about the people hiring you. It's about the decision maker, the hiring authority. But you're also trying to build trust and confidence in the other people you've interviewed with. And so you want to be sure that your messaging is targeting their needs and their interest. Now, elements of your VBS are going to be used to answer the question, tell me about yourself. And again, they're not asking to hear about your career in a summary, 90 seconds or less. They want to know about your values, why you're interested in this job. They want to know if they hire you, what value will they realize? And again, learn it, do not memorize it, because when you memorize it, it kind of comes out sort of like electronic voice. Authenticity is critical for impact here. So learn it, and then the more you learn it, keep practicing it. Play with certain elements of it. Learn how to take pieces of it out and apply it to certain situations. Okay. If you need some help with that, we're happy to schedule a mock interview for you. And I can also teach you how to do a value brand statement and show you. These are part of our a la carte services. You don't have to buy a full package. Now, every time you want to tailor your answer to the needs of the prospective employer. It's not what you think they want to hear. It's what are they telling you in the job summary? What have you heard in earlier interviews that would suggest that these are the issues they're concerned about? Don't try to fight City Hall. It just doesn't make any sense. And your network and you're tailoring your speech presentation, that's why all this is so important. It's going to help you be more focused. It's going to help you guide your career forward. Now, let's now move on and we've talked about your resume. We've talked about networking and the importance of those issues. Let's now talk about elevating your interview skills. First of all, your goal when you start down this road is not to get the job. That you'll lose sight of the next interview, which could be critical. Your job is get to the next interview. That's it. Just always focus on the next interview, getting beyond that so that you have a chance to go to the next level. And that's really, really important. And I see so many people, they have the eye on getting the job. Okay, that's important. You want to have a goal. But what you don't want to do is get so taken away by that goal that you're not focusing on delivering the value you need to deliver in the current interview. I think what you need to do is you go in for a second interview and you know some of the questions they've asked you in the first interview. So if you stumble with any of those answers, now you have a chance to really plan your responses. And keep in mind that you've got to rehearse for interviews. I mean, there's no excuse not to. Once you kind of think about what they're looking for, and based on the questions you've already been asked and what some of the issues are, you sit down and you create a through line. And a through line basically is just a line across a piece of paper. And you say, okay, on the right side, this is what I want to achieve. Okay. And these are the issues that I'm going to stress to get there. These have come up before. I'm going to use these stories and these stories and this story and that story. And I'm going to create a through line on a theme to help me get to the next interview. This is a summary presentation today. There's a lot more to this. So if you have an interest in learning how to become a better interviewer, we're happy to help you. We have an a la carte service, but we also have a premium coaching program that will help you get to the next step in your life. Always rehearse your VBS. This is not, okay, I know it now, I don't have to worry about it. No, keep rehearsing. I have one of my clients has to drive 45 miles each way to work. And most of it's on the state highways. And, I said, okay, I'm going to send you a card with 4 different scenarios for a job that, you could do. And I want you to practice taking your VBS and pulling elements from that and practicing out loud while you're driving. The other thing you can also do is get the core and categorical breakdown or worksheet on our website. You go to johngself.com and then click that little red ribbon on the right side of the home page, and that'll take you to our course portfolio. You can download this for free, and basically how you use it, every job can be broken down into categories, okay? And that the categories might be human resources, okay? And in the human resources, it might be they've had a turnover problem in this department or this division, and it's exceeding 25%. Well, if you're an experienced operator, you already know what that's costing them. So, that may be something, okay, that's one of their problems. One of the other issues may be we're having trouble hiring people or whatever. So you break all of that down and you start applying in each category, HR, financial operations, regular day-to-day operational management, marketing and governance. Now, governance sometimes is not reporting to a board. Governance may be your relationship with your boss. But in each one of these categories, you're going to think about your strengths and how you can apply them to discuss your philosophy about leadership, the challenge you had in a certain special project, your biggest setback. You can come up with all this information and you break it down in every category: strengths, successes, stories you can tell to illustrate the successes, weaknesses, and the oh my God, oh, I really screwed up. Well, you don't want to have to talk about that, but they may ask. And so you can't slide off of it. And if you hum and hem and haw, you're probably going to look bad. So if you've had a mistake in a certain category or a certain job, write it down and write an answer. You'll probably never have to give it, but you'll go into that interview confident that you have an out if they ask you something that you weren't expecting. So, those are really important things. So don't hesitate to request this information. Again, you break the position down by categories: operations, finance, HR, and marketing. And then you connect your strengths with each category. And if you've had an, oh my God, I wish I'd never done it, but I did, and I really looked dumb. If you've had one of those, address it. Don't try to deny it, because everybody makes mistakes. And when you try to deny it, it sounds like you're a little bit off center when it comes to emotional intelligence. So what do? You sit down and say, boy, I once said something to a bunch of nurses in anger, and it was offensive, and it never should have been said. And I was so embarrassed when it was brought to my attention. And I was horrified. And I brought all of the nursing executives and the people that were in the room that day that I made that blunder and apologized to them. They came in my office. I was there on an interim assignment. I stood up and I came out from behind my desk and I said, I've asked you to come here today because I owe you an apology. I said something that was entirely unprofessional and inappropriate, and I said it in anger. And I want you to know that I appreciate the job you do and that that statement was inappropriate, and I ask for your forgiveness. And I promise you that I'll try to do better going forward. And most everybody, said, thank you very much. We really appreciate you doing that. We just were kind of taken back, and it all worked out. But it was hugely embarrassing. And I wouldn't go into all that detail. What would I do? I once said something I shouldn't have done. I took the initiative and brought the people in and visited with HR and got some guidance. And then I said, I did this. I am so sorry. We pivoted. I learned so much from that experience. I never made that kind of mistake again. So now I'm talking about lessons learned. So acknowledge the mistake. What did you do? And what are the lessons learned? And don't get into too much detail like I just did. Okay. Sometimes I try to explain things too much as a teacher and as a guide. So please forgive me. Be prepared to address your weaknesses. If you do have one of those bad oh my God situations, the fact that you may never get asked, but the fact that you've got taken the time to write an answer and that you're really comfortable with the answer and you know the answer, you're going to be much more confident. You're going to say, man, I'm covered on everything. And that's going to make a difference because when you're confident, you have better self-awareness and you're more self-aware in the room. You're able to see what people are doing, how they're reacting, and that's really important. There are only 70 or 80 questions that are really related to a job. And you can find these books that give you 132 or 90, but all this other stuff. Some of those questions are very generic, others are not. But if you feel like you need help with a mock interview, we're happy to schedule one of those. They take a lot of time, but they're worth the investment of your time and your money. So and what we do during the interview, we stop periodically and I give you feedback on how you could have answered a question more appropriately or more effectively. But you got to research. You got to rehearse. So even if you do a mock interview, that just sets you up with some good answers and some good direction. You still have to rehearse, rehearse, rehearse so that you are able to maximize your knowledge, your experience, and your ability for that board or that for the interviewer. Now, I'm a big storyteller. My father once said that I could probably chat up a brick wall, and he's probably right. God rest his soul. But I think stories are incredible because they can take something that may be kind of dry and create the drama about really what was happening. A financial turnaround. We were worried about making payroll. We did this and this, and we brought in this, and we were able to use this strategy to get an emergency a bank line of credit, and it covered us. And then we sent somebody off to Medicare, and they brought it back, and we got a check and got it in the bank. The banker was thrilled and told us that he'd be, since we did this in such a professional way, he'd be happy to help us again in the future if we ever needed it. So something like that, you just make a little narrative. So when you're thinking about your strengths and weaknesses and successes, have stories for your successes because you can apply them in so many different ways. So it's not like you're going to go in there and have to make all this stuff on the fly. Break it down and be organized by category, and on your through line for your philosophy. I've got these different things that I've done, and these are the strengths I have. These are the stories I'm going to tell. And when you have a through line, that's all about being consistent. People are going to ask questions all over the place. What you want to do is you want to take them back to your through line to emphasize the points you think you need to emphasize in order to convince them you're the right person to be awarded the jobs. And I will tell you this, stories build trust and they build confidence. And people make decisions that may be triggered by emotion, but they're going to hire the person that's qualified that they like and trust. And stories can build that trust. And stories that with before and after explanations or before and after metrics with some clear winning outcome, those are extraordinarily powerful. So if you have some of those, really plan to use them. And if you don't remember some of them in the past, well, you've just had another lesson on why you should keep a journal. I'm going to close with this. Everyone has a story to tell. I interviewed over 9,000 people in my career, and I can tell you, I have yet to meet anybody that didn't have an interesting story or two that could have been absolutely dynamite in a job interview. Here's an example of that through line. It is, what message do you want to leave with the interviewer? specific skills, adaptability, or adaptability. I'm a speech therapy major today, it sounds like, or a record of success, even in a learning situation. And some people, they go through their careers and they change, and sometimes we call them pivots. And if you've had several of those, give the facts, tell the stories, and emphasize your success. Always talk about your big why. Why are you making this latest pivot? Why did you leave your last job? These are all things you need to think through. You may be asked about them. You need to think through. So if you are asked, you're not going to be making up a question on the fly. And if you had one of those oh my God experiences where you did make a mistake, having to explain that and not already have the answer ready, well, there's no really excuse for that. That's bush league. Now, if I can help you schedule a call, I can answer some of your initial questions in a 30-minute courtesy call. We're not going to try to sell you anything, but I'm happy to help you any way I can. And so, if you want to schedule a call, I'm happy to do that. Go to my website at johngself.com, go to the bottom of the page and hit that red button, Talk to John, and it'll give you an opportunity to talk to me on the cell phone, your cell phone or my cell phone, or we can do it on WhatsApp, or we can do it on Zoom. I always enjoy seeing people, and I prefer that, but not everybody, until they decided they want me to coach them, or they're not ready to show me their face on Zoom. And so I understand that. I think everybody has their likes and dislikes. So if I can help you, please let me know. It's John at johngself.com. We're an executive coaching company that really focuses on helping people achieve their full potential. It's a great career, and one of the great joys is being able to help people like you achieve their goals. Thank you very much for joining us today, and I'll see you next week on Lunch and Learn.